This podcast may contain disturbing content for some listeners. It's intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. This is True Crime XS.
So there wasn't like a lot of true crime news that I was following, and then all of a sudden there's 50 things I'm following, which is sort of how it goes, I guess. So there was a shooting at University of Virginia.
I saw that. It was football players that were killed, right?
Yeah, it was football players. It was like some guy that was like on a class field trip with the victims, and then there was a shooting. I don't know a lot about it yet. Like there's all I turned around and there's already a Wikipedia article. I was like, this just happened. But basically 3 people were killed. They've identified the people that were killed. And there's a suspect who's already been arrested. That was like really strange to me. But it was Devin Chandler, Deshaun Perry, and Lavelle Davis were the 3 guys that were killed. And they arrested a guy named Christopher Darnell Jones. Just so strange. He's charged with second-degree murder, and he's got a gun charge, using a handgun in the commission of a violent felony.
Yeah, the gun charges are, a lot of times, that's what they use to bump up the time on charges. I don't know what happened. I saw that in my news feed, but there wasn't very much to it just yet. But
yeah, it was on
I've looked harder.
So what I heard was that there was some kind of class field trip where everybody was going to Washington, D.C. to see a play.
And this is college, right?
Yeah, this is college. So it was a class field trip. They come home. I mean, they're all in their 20s. All the victims and the suspect are like 20 to 23 years old, I think, is the age range.
Right.
So they had come back, and they were on one of those buses that you take that are semi-comfortable, and they have like a little bathroom in the back type buses.
Yeah.
So a chartered bus basically, and they were parked at this is in Charlottesville, Virginia. They were parked at the University of Virginia theater building, like the drama building, and the shooting took place on the bus. So this is at 10:15 p.m. on November the 13th. So they issue a shelter-in-place warning, and that carries over to the next day, to about 11 o'clock the next morning. So starts on Sunday night, carries over to Monday, and there are multiple law enforcement agencies that are looking for this guy, and someone spotted him out in Henrico County around 11:30 the next morning. And he gets arrested. We don't know a lot about that one yet. It just like sort of started happening. And then, so there's these updates happening in the background on some of the old missing persons cases we've covered. One of those is, we didn't cover it that much on here because we were sort of hung up on Summer Wells for a minute. But around the same time, a little boy named Michael Vaughn, we did mention him on here. He went by Monkey. Do you remember this kid out of Fruitvale, Idaho, I believe?
Yeah, I remember him.
Because there was we were also covering Xavier's case at the same time, who has since been found. But so in the middle of November, they started excavating. And when I say excavating, I mean really excavating. An entire backyard there in Idaho. And they've arrested someone whose husband is already in jail on other charges. So she was charged with the failure to report a death. They haven't really specified a lot about that yet. I came across, people send me links to stuff all the time. I get different links to social media stuff, and I go watch it. YouTube Twitter, whatever. This one had a really interesting link somebody sent me where it was Michael Vaughn's mom, and she was like begging people to stop coming by her house and trying to talk to the suspects and the suspects' families and stuff. And that puts a lot of things in perspective for me. The problem was, so it got sent to me from a YouTube channel that was live from covering that stuff. And I was like, hold on a second. So, and then there was another guy, he was not at the scene, but another YouTuber who was former law enforcement. And he used it as one of those things like only law enforcement is trained to do these things. We should keep everything secret. And that turned me off because I was like, well, you don't know what you're talking about. I know him in real life, so I get a little annoyed with him. And then, so that's an Idaho case,
Well,
Michael Vaughn.
just to be clear, though, like, there's a big difference between, speculating, investigating a case, and actually approaching suspects.
Yeah, these were people that weren't really, they were not doing any kind of legwork or investigation or journalism. They were really like people kind of get obsessed with the attention that comes with true crime cases. A really good example of that is another thing is Richard Allen being arrested for the Delphi murders. Because we talked about that on the beginning of one of the episodes, but I don't know if that's going to air before all of this other stuff airs. And like, that's another case where Delphi has had to like kick people out of driveways. And the judge even said like the public was bloodthirsty. And they moved that guy, Richard Allen, to like safekeeping at a state correctional facility.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what ends up being presented there because I have my questions.
He's got multiple lawyers now. He sometime in November, I had logged into my case, and he suddenly had like several lawyers appointed to him. So I don't know like what that's going to look like, but there was at least 2 lawyers, maybe 3.
Yeah, and my case is a resource where you can look up court information. It doesn't have anything to do with you personally.
Yeah. No, it's like mycase.in.gov or something like that. Usually you can find a .gov website for almost every state where you can follow along with things that are public in different cases.
Right. And so just real quick to swing back around, we don't know that they found anything, right, with Michael Vaughn.
Yeah, nothing has been released there. Like, that was still ongoing. That search was like still going.
Right. So they got a credible tip and they're digging up the yard, and then we've got some people in custody, but we don't have any information.
Yeah, there's a woman in custody that's been arraigned, so her name's been released publicly at this point. All it says is it's a failure to report a death. It's not all linked together, but it's been kind of common sense linked together. Sure. And then her, I guess it's her husband, is already awaiting trial on federal charges and some other charges that appear to kind of sprawl over Oregon and Idaho. Somebody said there were sex trafficking. I've not seen like a lot of solid evidence there. And then Adventures with Purpose. Have you heard about what happened there?
About the allegations of abuse from a family member.
Yeah, and that seems to have effectively dismantled Adventures with Purpose after one of the founders of that group. It's not just allegations at this point. It's now become an indictment out of Utah, I think. And it's for charges of sexual abuse. I believe there's a sexual assault charge. I don't know exactly what they are. I saw them kind of passing, and someone invited me to have a conversation about it. And I kind of sat in and listened for a few minutes, and I was like, I'm going to have to wait on all of this because it was like just unfolding in the court. And I was like, I can't, like, I'm not going to speculate on something that's, I want to say it's 30 years old. So the guy would have been like 16 or 17 years old, but he's one of the founders of Adventures with Purpose, and it involved at least one family member. There were multiple counts in there, but that's going to be a big true crime story in 2023, I think.
Well, it may not be. It may fall by the wayside. But it did seem like he was sort of baited in, and there was a misunderstanding about a statute of limitations. That's what I gathered from it. Anyway.
Yeah. Do you mean like from the perspective that he thought the statute of limitations had expired, so he talked about it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct. I think that because he admits to it, or he at least alludes to it, it's enough. Like whatever, because I I read through it, and it it's ending up being a disaster because it was really what he did was really bad, and the way that he handled it. I feel like the only reason it came out the way it did was because he thought he was untouchable. Because otherwise, I don't really see somebody responding the way that he did in the communication that was there.
Yeah, it's pretty public, and it's from the Adventures with Purpose, like official communications channels as far as emails go. The person didn't initially, who I don't want to like name a bunch of names here because now you're getting into like there's
It's just a
victims of
relative.
sexual assault.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of different ones that have talked, and then there's at least one who hasn't talked. You can find it on social media if you want to go look for it. There's some interesting discussions about it. But it does look a little bit like they were wanting him to take some ownership and responsibility. And I couldn't tell if that was like, if he was just an asshole about it, because he is kind of, his responses are not good. And they're very arrogant. But I couldn't tell if they were baiting him or if they really just wanted him to like own up to it and move, so that like apologize and move on type situation. That's what it initially read like to me, but then it's resulted in charges. So
I didn't see it that way. I didn't feel like they were trying to get him to apologize for it. I felt like it was actually surprising that he responded the way he did, and that for what I'm confused about a lot of it. It's really, I mean, I want to say it's none of my business, except now he's been, indicted, and the effect that that'll have on Adventures with Purpose is sort of yet to be seen. But it's not going to be the same anymore. I'm definitely not saying that it shouldn't be a thing because they were doing such great work. I just hope maybe like the other co-founders will keep moving forward. But I do feel like it was he's going to get what he deserves by his own doing here. I think.
yeah, they've started to respond and resign like a lot of the other people involved with Adventures with Purpose. See, so I came about that guy, and I'm not naming him either because like I don't want to do a whole episode on him, but I ended up finding him years ago because he was producing something else, had nothing to do with Adventures with Purpose, and I had some conversations with him about something I wanted to do. He had this one really cool thing he did before Adventures with Purpose. And I was like, how involved is he with that? Because he was listed as an executive producer. And I tried to talk to him about it. And we got to the point that we were like going to be signing NDAs and there was going to be a pitch back and forth. In all honesty, like just sometimes this happens. Nothing to do with this situation. I just didn't want to have anything to do with him. And it had nothing to do with like him being any kind of criminal or anything. It was just like my personality doesn't mesh well with people who are like very type A personalities. And he struck me as like I could tell he was going to like my idea. And then he was going to take my idea. And that was going to be it for my feedback based on the paperwork he was asking me to sign. And I just said, I'll just pass on this. And that was my only interaction with him. Adventures with Purpose got popular later. And it looks to me like Adventures with Purpose and the other people involved, because like Sam the Adventure Man is in there, and there's a couple of other YouTubers. I think they're going to become something bigger and better. And I don't think Adventures with Purpose will be the be-all, end-all of any of that stuff. I think Chaos Divers and some of these other groups will come up, and they'll have their own scandals and whatnot. We talked about the Michael Vaughn thing, and I guess I should circle back over there because in Moscow, Idaho, we have 4 college students that got killed. Apparently by an edged weapon, and it's some kind of targeted attack. Did you read about this?
I did. I was waiting for more information because that's interesting. And so they were stabbed or something to that effect. Because I immediately went to, they must have all taken some bad drugs.
That's what I thought. I thought they were all hanging out and either drank or took something.
Because of the response to an unconscious person, that's what the call went out as, right?
Yes.
And that's a lot different than like a response to a stabbed person. But, like I said, I was sort of waiting for some more information to come out, but there are 4 people and they were killed apparently. And like you were saying, I guess with a sharp edged instrument, which could be, usually they say that when they're not sure if it was a knife or something else, right?
Yeah, I started listening to like Boise State Public Radio, and that's like their version of NPR out there. They had a real simple thing that popped up on, I think it was on the 15th. It basically just said, police in Moscow, Idaho believe a knife or other edged weapon was used to kill 4 University of Idaho students this past weekend, providing an update and describing it as an isolated, targeted attack. But whoever is responsible for the deaths remains at large. The 4 students, 3 women and a man, were found dead in an apartment on King Road near campus. This is at the University of Idaho. The 3 women were all from Coeur d'Alene, that area. And the man was from Mount Vernon, Washington. So, they identified them as just some 20 and 21-year-old people. Interesting that happened. That type of situation is like stuff you really, like a knife being used to kill 4 people that close to a college campus late at night. And then it's kind of eerily like a slasher movie or something.
It really is. And they seem to be pretty confident that they had been killed at, I think it said between 3 and 4 in the morning.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, there's something up with this. I don't know. Do they have any suspects? Did you read if they had any suspects?
They haven't released any information about suspects currently. Stuff like that always makes me wonder a little bit because they immediately come out and they say, look, the community is safe. And that makes me go, wait, what?
Well, did they say that in this case?
That they said that they do not believe there is any kind of threat to anyone. But then at the same time, local news is flashing these stories about, killer who stabbed 4 Idaho students still at large. That's interesting to me.
Well, but that also means somebody knows something, I would think. Because if they don't know anything about who did it, then it's very reckless to say that the community is not in danger, I think.
Yeah, but that'll be one. It may or may not be on the more interesting of stories. It's a tragedy for 4 people to lose their lives like that.
It's, there's a lot of components that you have to think about in a situation where 4 young, vital people are, again, we don't know for sure, but it sounds like stabbed in some type of way. Because there's a lot of things that have to occur for 4 people to get stabbed, right? Because we're not talking about a gun here. So we're thinking, either they were incapacitated somehow. They could have, there's a wide variety of ways they could be incapacitated, including just simply being asleep, right?
Yeah.
But up close, personal contact to kill someone with a sharp-edged instrument. It'll be interesting to find out what happened, because it has to be somebody that had contact enough to kill them with a sharp-edged instrument, and enough time to kill all of them without anybody leaving or fighting back or escaping or whatever, right? And so that's always interesting to me, because that is a feat in and of itself,
Yeah.
unless they were restrained somehow. And even then, you've got to restrain 4 people. One of those people is going to react in some way, it seems like.
Yeah, I don't know what's happening there. I ran an early theory sort of by you that I'm not going to dredge up here again. I hear about those cases all the time, and I immediately wonder if so. In my opinion, the only way that you go, there's no danger to the public in a setting where this person just killed 20-year-olds, where the setting is made up entirely of 18 to 22-year-olds, being a college area. It's irresponsible if you don't either have a suspect in custody or have a situation where the suspect is among the dead. And there's a number of ways that can happen.
I immediately think, though, when they say that, like, the killer's still at large or whatever, I assume that it has been deduced that it's not one of the victims, but that could be my bad.
No. I'm not correcting you. I'm just saying that verbiage where you go, the community is safe. Those are the two situations where that would be true. Otherwise, you don't know.
Right. I agree. But it seems to me like they've contradicted that here, because they've said
Yeah.
the suspect's still at large, which, again, I could be wrong, but that implies that somebody knows something that indicates that the suspect was not also a victim of themselves, I guess.
Yeah.
And the community is safe, which, again, I guess it could just be that targeted. But they've got to have more information, and I guess we just have to wait for it. But this is going to be, this is a strange case, a quadruple stabbing, slashing type thing. It doesn't happen very often. And I am interested to sort of see how that went down, just for my own curiosity,
Yeah, I'm dying to see who the suspect or suspects turn out to be there. Bad pun intended, I guess. A terrible pun. But what we're doing today is we're marking an anniversary of sorts. This is first of a couple of episodes. I've said multiple times we just don't have the material for like a whole season. But I did want to circle back around to this case because it has been 10 years. It's been 10 years since the serial killer, or killer for sure, known as Israel Keys, took his own life in an Anchorage jail on December 2nd of 2012.
Yeah, you just made a very interesting distinction. Would you like to clarify that?
The serial killer versus killers?
Mm-hmm. Well, unless you made another one I missed.
Well, so, the truth is, we really only know about 3 victims of Israel Keys.
Right, and by the standard textbook definition of what a serial killer is, Lorraine and William Currier were killed at the same time, so it wouldn't really qualify him to be a serial killer.
Yeah, like if we believe that's it, that's the end of it. He's not a serial killer. He's just a abductor, rapist, murderer. Because he definitely abducts 3 victims. So he's a serial abductor or serial kidnapper.
And I've wondered, so it has crossed my mind. I've wondered about, is the reason that he didn't give more information is because he didn't have anything else to give, right?
Yeah.
I've played out a lot of scenarios as to why he gave up the couriers, the details that he surmised from the couriers. I believe his account of what happened, and I believe that that the couriers were in the farmhouse when it was torn down, and they were taken with the rest of the materials that were disposed of, with the people doing it not realizing there were bodies in there, right?
Yeah. Well, they were
And
just doing a crappy job and didn't want to know what the smell was related to.
and I mean, I can't say that I necessarily blame them. But so, why did he give up the couriers? Well, I thought maybe he was pretty certain that they would still be there. He talks briefly about the fact that perhaps he had plans, not perhaps, but he had plans to go back and burn the house down if they hadn't been found and the house was still there, right? And he
Yeah.
hadn't been caught, obviously, but he was caught, so that wasn't going to happen. And so, you have to wonder, well, did his, list of misdeeds begin with the couriers and end with Samantha Koenig, right? I don't necessarily think that's true, but I do have that in my mind because he was so detailed in some of the information he gave and so unwilling to give any.
Vague.
Huh?
Oh, your word was better. You went with unwilling, but I said
Well,
vague.
Yeah, he was so vague and unwilling to, cooperate further, even though, you know, in weighing out the entirety of the interviews and the information that we have, like when he's speaking with the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI and Anchorage PD, the task force they formed, it doesn't reason well that he played it the way he did. And that could just be because he's not the, brightest bulb in the batch, right? But it seemed like he could have accomplished way more by giving more details about other crimes that he had committed. He also, it seemed almost calculated the way that he didn't want it to be too many, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know. I have thought about that though. And it's interesting. We've never really talked about it that much, but you making that distinction. So essentially, if he really is only responsible for Samantha Koenig and the couriers, he wouldn't be a serial killer, right?
No, he would not. He'd be a serial kidnapper.
And he would be he would have killed multiple people.
Yeah,
I don't necessarily go by the textbook definition, and this actually gives me a good sort of outlet to explain that really quick, because if you think about the randomness of Samantha Koenig and the randomness of the couriers, how he walked down the street in their neighborhood looking for somebody that didn't have dogs and didn't have children, I would say that mindset is still that of a serial killer, even if his victims didn't add up to it, because he had absolutely no motivation to kill these particular people, except that he wanted to kill someone. And this was the parameters he went by, right?
Yeah, I think that makes him a predator. Absolutely.
And it's horrifying, right? And so that's one of those things where I do think there are probably more victims. I think that, in doing this research, I've gone by what Keyes has said. I'm not saying I believe he's honest all the time, but it opens up endless possibilities if I don't have some sort of parameters on it. But his thinking is it's the making of some of the cruelest intentions that I've ever seen a killer have. Because even, in other cases where we've seen stuff, I don't know that we've ever had the randomness of like the courier situation, right?
I think we have. I think we've had the randomness of it, and I could skip through, some different crimes in time and point that out. But I think what we haven't had is the callous recantation of the randomness of
that could be true. Yeah.
Like, I definitely think that crimes like that happen, but you don't usually have those killers. Like, in fact, most of the people I think of when I think of that type of crime, and it depends on how you want to categorize it, multiple people, home invasion, there's like a bunch of different ways that crime could be categorized that would make it unique. I think for me, most of those people either were never caught or they killed themselves before they started talking.
Well, that could be true. And the way that I categorize that particular situation is you've got a guy who picked a house at random. He broke in, he hung out there for like an extended period of time. He took his victims to a different location and then he left them there and they were not found, right? But for his confession, we would have no idea, right?
Yeah.
And that has fueled my thinking in looking at other cases, right? Because you have to think about all the different aspects of like the fact that Bill and Lorraine were missing and like their case, in and of itself before we knew Keyes did it, which, I didn't know anything about Bill or Lorraine Currier before Keyes talked about them. And, that it has shaped my thinking though on some things because without his confession, we would have no idea. They just left their house one day and there were signs of a break-in, but the investigators hadn't gotten very far and they certainly were never going to come to this conclusion.
No, they weren't. And so I've been through this twice where like I did 26 episodes on me thinking, all right, he's using these remote camping locations and pit latrines. I came back around and I talked to you again with the Cruel Summer episodes, which I think was another, 6 episodes, give or take. So I put a lot of information out there about Keyes and the randomness of it. And I've recounted a lot of different crimes that could potentially be involved with him. I have always wondered, sort of in general, not Keyes related, serial killer, serial predator related, how many crimes happen where when we look at them, we think they're one thing, and in reality, they're something else entirely different. Because that was and that uses Keyes' words. Because he said, some of the things I've done when it did get media coverage is basically unrecognizable.
They have no idea what really happened.
Right. And I've had a couple of things. I think one or two of the things that we're talking about have already, we've already sort of addressed them at one point. But I've had a couple of lingering cases, particularly in Texas. And I think people know this by now. I have an incredibly hard information getting officials from the state of Texas to behave themselves and give out information. I went down a really long path on an unrelated to Keyes case that I still will pick up and call. We even had the niece on the show for a couple of episodes, and she and I are still in contact. And she will every once in a while she'll get a big new piece of information, or I'll get some new information and we'll share it. And we just had trouble getting straight answers out of the state of Texas. There's a case there, this woman named Ellie Pierce, that if Israel Keyes was not at, his last that we know of bank robbery, wearing a hard hat with blonde hair to sort of tilt public thinking to Jimmy Tidwell, I would argue until I'm blue in the face that Ellie Pierce was the case of, Israel Keyes' last victim. And, that's only because I can't get all the information that I want out of the local police. I can't even get incident reports. They literally gave me a single call sheet, which is when they took an incoming call about that case, and it has no information that's helpful to me. And it's such a small department, such a small area that they just they've refused to give me any more information so that I can get some of these other cases off. I did get this one piece of information that I shared with you recently. This was Mitzi Gay Jones, and I'm going to kind of gloss over this for a second, only because her case is strange. But she is a young woman who, at the time she went missing, had long blonde hair. It does not coincide with Keyes, unfortunately, because it won't line up with the bank robbery, unfortunately. We talked about her in season 1. She went missing on March the 8th, 2012. that Mitzi Gay Jones went missing in Texas. This is a 39-year-old, 5 foot, 120-pound female. She had brown hair that had gray and blonde in it. She had multiple tattoos, including a flower on the back of her neck, a flower on her left leg. She had a star on her calf. She was last seen in the 2400 block of South New Braunfels, San Antonio, Texas. This is just a few days before Keyes is arrested. And so it's a weird one, this case, because when I talked about it before, I didn't have a lot of information. I just kind of gave some sort of glaring overviews, I guess, of her case and some theories about what had happened. She's really far south of where Keyes is eventually arrested in Lufkin, Texas, to the point that like it doesn't make a lot of sense for her to be involved at all with what he had going on there, because it's almost 5 hours away. But her case comes up again because I noticed, and this happens sometimes. I don't know if you keep track of these or not. I don't. I showed you like kind of the spreadsheet that is kept in house. Occasionally, I will go back and hunt down information. This one, the piece of information that was new. So the first thing that happened is her NCIC entry changed. So she originally was stated to have brown hair, and if you see the pictures of her, she clearly does not have brown hair in like her driver's license photo or any of that. The NCIC status changed for some reason in 2020 to state clearly that her hair is brown, and then in this weird parenthetical expression, it now says dyed orange. And then the other thing that changed about her case was the circumstances of her disappearance. She was released from the Bexar County Jail on March 8, 2012, after being arrested for prostitution. And I'm pretty sure that this completely rules her out. She's 5 hours away, and if she was arrested for prostitution, I'm guessing that lifestyle, although Keyes did have numbers for and rankings and contact information for different sex workers on him when he was arrested, I don't think one that's 5 hours away is necessarily going to be the case. There certainly would still be time to take Mitzi Gay Jones, and she has the right sort of possibility to have run into him if he were actually utilizing anyone engaging in sex work. He says he didn't. He said it was an idea that he had. She kind of gets ticked off my list, but I just found it interesting that this much. So she wasn't even reported missing until November of 2015.
And so I have to say, this whole project on Keyes, it's all been sort of an exploration on, who the hell did he kill, right? Like that's what we want to know. And this is an interesting one because she was last seen on March the 8th of 2012. And so, that doesn't mean that was the day that something happened to her. We just know that like after that point, she wasn't seen again. Right. To the extent that like in 2015, her family reported her missing. All right. And so like, we don't know where she went. We don't know for certain that she would have been 5 hours away, but what we can say is there's a woman who like on basically the day that Keyes came into Texas, because this is when, so if you think about what Keyes is doing at this point in time, this is where he flew into Las Vegas, and he drove through Arizona and New Mexico into Texas for his sister's weddings, I believe, right?
Yeah, he was going over to Wells, Texas. Essentially, he had two sisters who were going to be married. at this time. So
And
that's
so
what.
this is right before he was staying in a hotel room with his sibling, and he left, and he is pulled over by a Texas Ranger, I believe,
Yeah.
and arrested. So that happened on the 13th. All right. So while there are a lot of circumstances that have to line up in order for her to end up being one of his victims, it's not out of the realm of possibilities. It certainly is notable that she was last seen on the day that he was basically coming in right before he was arrested. Now, keep in mind, the way that he ended up being, arrested was they were tracking his movements using the ATM card, right?
Correct.
And so it for me, it's a little confusing, the Texas part of Key's story, because he was in Texas two times, very close together.
Yes.
And I wasn't sure that he had a victim on the second trip there, because it was the first trip where he was gone for a while and he missed his return flight, right?
Yeah.
And so, I don't know for certain, but like I feel like we would be remiss to not mention her, because it certainly would be a possibility. A probability, I don't know, but it's not like there's a ton of people that went missing in Texas during that very short period of time, right?
Yeah, I have not been able to even get close to making their paths cross, which with and I'll say this, I really think there's only like one victim here that we're looking for, if there is one. I think when he left that day, there is a strong potential he was going to look for a victim that he had either taken on the first trip and maybe dispose of their remains, or there's a victim from here. I don't think there's more than that. But this, and you can listen to the Texas episodes that we have in our feed. You can also listen to the Cruel Summer episodes from the summer of 2021. We did a little coverage of Texas there with some real specific information about those ATM visits, and at least one man who went missing there that was very confusing for me. I think the fact that he had phone numbers for women who are engaging in selling these particular services, and that this woman who went missing the day he gets to Texas, or is last seen the day he gets to Texas, she stands out to me. I've never been able to get a lot of additional information because, and I want to stress this, her family reports are missing in 2015, but her investigation doesn't begin until May of 2016. So by the time this woman is even really looked for, Keys has been dead for 4 years, and she has been missing for an indeterminate amount of time, because the last official contact with her is this incarceration that ends on March the 8th of 2012. I can't rule her out. I just wanted to revisit her because she's in there.
I want to just tell you something really quick, which actually this is pretty far out to be saying this at this point, I guess. But let's see. So during so from March 8th to March 13th of 2012, there are there's a lot. So it may contradict what I was thinking, but it appears to be 6 people that go missing. There's
In Texas?
In Texas.
Okay.
But hold on, because there's a element of missing people in Texas that you have to take into consideration.
Yeah, the border jumps. Is that what you're looking at? There's 4 of those.
There are 4 of them.
I think there's 4 of them. Yeah.
Let's see, 1, 2.
When we say border jump on the recording, and then we don't say much else, it's because there's an INS case that's been opened by a family member who says, my family member was not a U.S. citizen, and they crossed over from one of these borders south of Texas. Doesn't mean they're from Mexico. They could be from a variety of places. And they said that they were going to call us when they got to this checkpoint, and we never heard from them again. They're border jump cases where we don't have any information because it doesn't originate in the United States. It's someone calling from outside the United States saying, please help me find my family member that went into the United States. They're very confusing cases, and they are very frequent in the cases on the southern U.S. border.
Right. And so it's not that I don't take them into consideration. I just find it highly unlikely that Keyes is going to have anything to do with that. But so taking those out of the equation, there's 3 of those. And then there's 2 cases. Both happen on March the 8th.
So the weird thing the other case that Meg is referencing here is a man named Dennis Rogers, and he is covered in
Right.
The Cruel Summer episodes. The weird part about him is he's a way less than ideal victim for Israel Keyes. However, he is between 2 of the ATM stops and goes missing at a time that would put him on a parallel road from the highways that Keyes said he was trying to avoid during that time, between the ATMs where he's withdrawing money from Samantha Koenig's account.
And, while I would hate for Dennis Rogers to have been a victim of Israel Keyes, I don't know that I really think that it's likely that he was. We can't not mention this because, like I said, you've got these 2 people going missing in this because if you look at a map and you think about time and place, it's odd, right?
Yeah.
That you've got these people that are missing, and we're talking about, at this point, it's over 10 years out, right?
Correct.
They're continuing to be missing. And that says something. Because, they're not just runaways. They're not people who have been found otherwise. And, they have elements to them. We know a little bit more about Dennis Rogers' case because there's a little bit more information. Mitzi Jones, she just basically fell off the face of the earth. It's entirely possible that nothing happened to her in March. It's just the last recorded, because you said she was released. And so I'm assuming that's what they're using as her last seen date.
Yeah, they call it the official date of last contact because the people that were in touch with her that day were officers who would eventually be questioned for a missing persons report years later. Since it's such a big time span, she's literally reported missing in 2015. Because of that, the 2015, the backwards gap to March of 2012, that's the closest they have, is the last thing we have where we know for sure her bank account was used, her phone number was used, anything happened to her, was she walked out of this county jail.
Right. And so I wonder, okay, and you can have an opinion on this. I'm sure you do. I wonder that if that were the case, let's say that, Keyes had somehow crossed paths with Mitzi Jones, why not use her for information to give to the investigators?
I'm with you on that. I think most of what Keyes would have been holding back probably involves male victims. I think that would be more something he did not want to get public, is for his family and his mom and his daughter to know that he had male victims and what he did to them. At least with Bill Courier, the explanation there is Lorraine was there.
I suppose, yeah.
But
I don't know. I mean,
I'm fishing at that point. That's complete speculation. So I do not know unless he did something unless he did something to her that would give away a lot of stuff. She doesn't necessarily she never makes it off my list. And I'm really just revisiting her here. I don't really
see how she could make it, because she's, as far as where he was, where she was, the information we have, it is a viable, it's a viable person, right? She's a viable person who might be a victim as far as time and space goes. The other elements of that, when did she really go missing? Well, we have no idea because so much time passed before she was reported missing, right?
Yeah.
But, And I find it compelling, and I feel like everybody that investigates crime should find it compelling when you whittle down the nitty gritty here, because you've got Keyes traveling from Alaska, driving this specific route through that is traceable because he's making these ATM stops, right? There are only so many people missing at this point in time, right?
Yeah.
From where he was during that period of time. And so, you can't just say no way, because it is actually a possibility.
Yeah, it is a possibility. And I mean, we would have to know more about her movements after she leaves that jail and where she goes.
And it doesn't seem like that's
And
going to be
we
possible.
no, we're not going to get that information, but we would have to, like, if it exists, we're not going to get it. And I think if it exists, then her date of last contact would be changed. Even if we didn't have those details, I think they would give us like a little something more. But her case is one I have a rolling public records request in the state of Texas for, constantly trying to update my own request. She would have been 39 years old when she went missing. Today, she would be 49 years old.
Well, and if I could just, this gives a nice little kind of breakdown here from March the 8th, 2012 to March the 13th, 2012, which is the day Keyes was arrested. Today, in 2022, there are 14 people that went missing during that 5-day period of time. Okay. There's 14 total people.
One of them is in Tupper Lake.
Well, two are in California. One is in Georgia. One is in Indiana. One is in Tupper Lake, New York. One is in Oklahoma. One is in Oregon. One is in Pennsylvania. One is in Tennessee. And then 5 are in Texas, but 3 of those are what I would consider like an immigration issue. And so, I mean, I'm just saying, if you look at that, you have to wonder, right?
Yeah.
I mean, only 14 people went missing during that, or continue to be missing at this point during that 5-day period.
Yeah, and Texas brings up a couple of interesting things for me, because he spends a brief amount of time down at Fort Hood. We don't have the exact dates. It's during his service. So it's, a decade before this. And I don't have a lot more on Mitzi Jones. What I do have is 2 other like weird sort of sets of circumstances to talk about. I actually have a missing person in Ezell, but I want to warn you, the dates don't sound like they match up when I start talking here. I'm going to talk about her. I'm going to explain a little bit of what I've run into trying to get the information on her. And then I'm going to lay out one other thing in Texas. Okay. This is a woman whose name is Tammy Cherie Ellis. She is definitely reported missing in May of 2012. She is from Azle, Texas. A-Z-L-E. Do you know why I'm bringing that up? Why I'm bringing that word up?
Azelle?
Yeah.
Well, because that's where the bank robbery was.
Okay. So when Israel Keyes goes to Texas, and these, like Meg said, 2 confusing trips, he first shows up in Texas and he commits a bank robbery on February the 16th, 2012. And what I would describe as a fairly massive arson fire. You've seen the pictures of the fire, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is not the time he gets arrested. He is going to go back to Alaska. He's going to stage everything related to Samantha Koenig's ransom note, including like proof of life, photos, or Polaroids. I don't know how you want to describe those. The gist of this case that I'm going to tell you about, This woman goes missing in Ezell, and the accounts of her disappearance, including from the police, are all completely dubious. This woman's name is Tammy Cherie Ellis. She was 24 years old. She had recently dyed her hair bright red. She was 5'1" tall and weighed 95 pounds. She has multiple tattoos. She has flames on her abdomen, flames on her upper back, a butterfly in the middle of her back, a tribal tattoo on her lower back, and a skull on her outer left leg. If you go on Charlie Project, here's what you're going to read. It says that Ellis was last seen at a residence in the 6100 block of Big Wood Court off of Tenderfoot Trail and Jacksboro Highway in Ezell, Texas on April 28th, 2012. That is the official line and the only line in her police report. So all the information I just gave you, which is her height, her weight, her age, not even her eye color, but her hair color, plus that line is the entire police report. There is a call reference that gets mixed up with it. It's an emergency services call in Ezell, Texas on April 28th, 2012. Separate of this, where someone calls in to report they hear a girl screaming from a gravel pit behind their home. The police arrive. They go to the house where the call was made. They go to the gravel pit and they clear the gravel pit and they just say there's no person there. And this incident is, for some reason, forever linked to Tammy Cherie Ellis. But the description of the person at the gravel pit, I am not sure it is even close to Tammy Cherie Ellis, because it describes hearing a child screaming. This incident report. And it's also from April 28th, 2012. And it is a single line. Caller reports a child, female, screaming at the gravel pit. That is the whole report. I don't know how all of this gets put together, where people tell the story. I have gone on and I've perused the Facebook pages, and I can tell you a little bit about Tammy. This area where she lived is right between Tarrant and Parker counties. Both of them have multiple reports of Tammy having been arrested. I don't know what all of the arrests are for. I can just tell you that of the 8 or 9 arrests that I found, there was assault causing bodily injury and family violence that she was dismissed. That was from February 15th, 2011. I found different accounts of her having been arrested for probation violation related to family assault and what is known as other assault, which I don't know exactly what that means. Other assault to me, I guess they didn't classify it as domestic violence. The last accounting I have of her, she's actually released to another agency. And what I think it is I think her probation officer comes and picks her up and lets her go. Here's the wild part. There is another Tammy Ellis who lives very close to Ezell, Texas. And some of the stories you read online are not Tammy Cherie Ellis. The other Tammy Ellis is not missing, but was also in trouble multiple times. The one account I found in here from the missing persons report shows up on medium.com. They were able to get a snippet of the missing persons report. It's very small. And this report is from 2016. So I want to be clear, we're talking about an incident from 2012. Where Are They? The podcast and Missing in Texas are cited as sources on the Medium post for someone named Jennifer from December of 2021. I'm not going to link to it anywhere. I don't know the veracity of this. I'm just going to use this one little section. Tammy Ellis was also apparently hanging with questionable people in 2012. And this is this person's words, not mine. I'm quoting. In fact, I did find an arrest record for her in late 2010 for battery, and it looks like she did do a couple of months in jail. But without knowing more specifics about what happened there, I don't want to pass any judgment on her for this. So Tammy does get arrested in late 2010, and this is me talking, not the quote anymore. She goes to jail for about 2 weeks. She goes to trial. The judge releases her on probation for a guilty plea. It looks like it says guilty / no contest. But so she's on probation, which is why I said her release to another agency in 2011 is actually not her getting out. It's her being released to her probation officer. And then it says, so on April 28th, 2012, Tammy was allegedly known to be at a house on Bigwood Court off of Tenderfoot Trail. This is the exact same information that the Charlie Project reports. It goes a little bit further. Bigwood Court is a dead-end road with just a handful of houses. I'm guessing, again, we don't know for sure, that someone had confirmed seeing her at this house, and that is why the police consider this her last known whereabouts. So behind Bigwood Court sits the Dickey Carr Sand and Gravel Pit, a large remote area with several bodies of water. On that day, April 28th, a house that sits near the gravel pit called police to report that they heard a woman screaming. There are reports that say the area was investigated and searched by law enforcement when they got that call, but they found nothing. And some reports say that the police showed up at the house that reported it, and they told police that they had walked out to the pit and searched, but they didn't find anything. Police took them at their word and never went back there. I cannot say for certain which report is true, but seeing as Tammy was last seen on that day right near the gravel pit, I think this report is something we can't dismiss. After Tammy was last seen, someone reported her missing and started putting up missing posters around town. They received multiple reports that people had last seen her with a man named Brett Harmon. Not trying to throw people under the bus here, but this is popular knowledge among Tammy's friends and family that she was with this Brett Harmon guy. The reports are confusing. Some say that's who she was just last known to be with, and some reports say that she was last seen with him after April 28th. It's also talked about a few times on her Facebook page that she was allegedly with this Brett Harmon guy. She also has a listing in WebSleuth, and she has a listing in NCMEC. I'm just going to go ahead and say this right here. The missing persons flyer started going up in the summer of 2012. I was able to trace that all the way back. She's reported missing like late summer 2012. Here's the thing about Tammy Ellis's case that bothers me quite a bit. Tammy Ellis's social media activity stops in February of 2012. She's in Azell, Texas. Her social media stops in February of 2012. I cannot believe that I can rule her completely off the list, because when I go into NamUs and I look Tammy Ellis up, and I know you do this all the time and you're way better at this than I am, they have her date of last contact as May 1st, 2012. They report in here that Fort Worth has been investigating her case with a 2013 date. I don't know if you saw the dates on there. So I've tried to get in touch with family and friends of Tammy Ellis. So if you go on Facebook right now and you type in her name in Azell, Texas, what comes up is not actually her. There's an active Facebook page where people are openly talking about a suspect or two. And it's not like a remembering her page or anything like that. It looks like it's her page, but it's not her talking. It's people talking about her still being missing. And they bring up a couple of different suspects. And so this is one of those cases where everybody has a story. We saw this with Holly Bobo. We saw this with Delphi. People say that there are pictures of her tied up, and there are pictures of her after she went missing where they believe that she is being held against her will. And I've often wondered, and this is pure speculation, if this is not a case where this is what it looks like if Israel Keys takes someone. Because all the reports that I can get on Tammy Ellis end in February of 2012. And I completely understand that there are 3 places on the internet that state that she was seen in April of 2012. But everything I can get on her ends in February of 2012. She's in Azell, Texas. They are consistently blaming someone named Brett and someone named Wayne. And they're, demanding information. This goes from about 2014 to about 2016. And then the information on her page sort of dies off. They have this one weird message. From September 12th, 2014, Tammy Ellis, whoever is on her page, it's some relative. They don't identify themselves, but they state, we got a call today from the FBI. They would not give us a name, but they gave us information that someone had been arrested and that there would not be a further arrest in this case right now, but that soon they would tell us more about this. There was quite a few people that were either there or involved, and that her case will be going from missing to a murder, but now they're waiting for some DNA to come back on someone who supposedly gave them a white sheet that she was wrapped in. And then nothing else happens on this page. I wondered if there was a call from the FBI and it didn't say all of that information, because that doesn't sound like what the FBI would give out in that type of phone call. But I wondered if the FBI phone call in 2014 to the Ellis family was because they had discovered the same thing I had, meaning the FBI, and that is that Tammy Ellis's police reports, Tammy Ellis's social media, and Tammy Ellis's life that's trackable ends in February of 2012 in Azell, Texas. Have you looked at this case? I mean, there's nothing out there.
I can't find. Well, so you say, so what was documented in February of 2012?
That she was released from her probation.
And is that where we think that like she was picked up or something by her probation officer?
It's just that it's not even documented that she's alive in February 2012. The social media that she had has now been taken over by family. It ended in 2012 being Tammy Ellis. Like, there's no social media for her after that. There's a new account created the following year, but that account doesn't have any pictures. It doesn't have any posts.
I was just trying to figure out what definitively occurred in February versus
there was a court action. It looks like she was released from her probation by a gavel punch. Basically, it looks like there was an order in February 2012 releasing her from her obligations to community corrections there.
Okay, so that's just some sort of public record.
That's the last public record for her, yeah. And she's not reported missing until May of 2012.
Right. And so and that has to do with the April 28th is that the account of someone hearing a girl scream? Is that where that comes from?
So the April 28th is, and depends on how you read this. There's people that talk about this online, but it's very hard to read through the spelling and the grammar. But basically, the gravel pit scream on April 28th is attributed to her, and then she's reported missing a few days later.
But is the gravel pit scream, like the timing of that, is that where they get that day from?
Yes.
Well, the reason I've just never looked into this because obviously if she's alive in April of 2012, she's not his victim. But at the same time, I mean, I can get behind something concrete, but to me, I feel like that date had to come from somewhere. And if it is just the gravel pit scream, I don't buy that. But if it's something more to that, like her neighbor saw her or something like that. I don't know. I've never been able to get, and I appreciate the fact that there's some sort of court record in February, but it seems like that would be on the uh, paperwork. If they're going off of just the scream, I'm just confused by it is all.
Well, so I was wondering if the being released from probation wasn't just she didn't commit any violations and it was over. So I can't say for sure.
I don't know. I mean, all I know is I can't find enough to speculate that the data is wrong.
Oh, well, so the only reason she stays on my Israel Keys list, I don't have a strong reason beyond this.
Well, she's in Azell. I mean,
she's in Azell, Texas. It's the right year and the right 3-month time period where no one seems to have had track of Tammy. And then there's this, we got a call from the FBI Facebook message. And it says they wouldn't give names, but that they did get information from someone that was arrested. And they told us they aren't making any arrests right now.
And when was that?
That's from September 17th, 2014.
And so you're thinking like maybe that was with regard to Keys.
That would have been in the 2-year follow-up. So after Keys' death, which is December 2012, all the way to December 2014, the FBI did an incredible amount of work to try and see if they could link him to any other crimes. I don't think this person understood the phone call they were getting. I think this phone call would be, can you clarify the person flat out, they may not have even gotten a call from the FBI. They flat out say on here that the FBI was giving away evidence, and I do not believe that.
I was going to say, it almost sounds like somebody just pretended to be the FBI and called them so they would like stop their crusade or whatever.
I definitely believe that in the 2-year time period after Keys' death, these people could have gotten a phone call saying, it's a possibility that your loved one, Tammy Ellis, has been murdered. Is there, can you point us to who was the last person to talk to her or who filed the police report, and maybe doing some verification on paperwork they'd found. The police paperwork, first of all, it's in Texas. I've had trouble getting real paperwork on this case. And every other source that I've read about Tammy Ellis's case on the internet seems to use the same bad source for their information.
Well, she's the only person that is specifically denoted to be missing from Azell, Texas. The only person.
Yeah, and it's the source that's bad is a May 2012 article from the Azell News, just stating that she's missing.
And what does it say?
It states that she's missing. Tammy Ellis of Azell, Texas is thought to be missing.
And what's the date on that?
May 5th, 2012.
Okay, well, her name estate is May the 1st.
So,
all we got to do is get past the date. I think she would be ripe for this situation. It seems like there's a lot of other underlying contributing factors. I will say that if we could find some sort of, even just leaning towards verifiable information that, her missing date is more like March 1st or, whatever. She absolutely could be one of Keys' victims. She would be an excellent, her criteria would be excellent for that sort of random victim that may or may not exist on his first trip, right? Because we have information on his first trip. And so that was the time that he went and he got his vehicle stuck in the mud. His family waited for him in the parking lot of a shopping center overnight. We ended up with information that he had gone into Walmart and purchased a shovel and
Air
room
freshener.
yeah, air freshener, um, and lube too,
Yep.
which is weird. But so there's little bits and pieces here. So because of her location being in Azell, Texas, she is the only person at this point in time who is in NamUs from Azell, Texas, that is reported missing. That doesn't mean she's the only person that's ever been reported missing. Just right now, she's the only person from Azell.
Correct.
Okay. I mean, if it does sound like there's other things that could have happened here within her own life, just life happening.
I totally agree. Yeah.
You surmised it by saying that she had been hanging around questionable people. There's a story. There's several stories from people who knew her and her family talking about what may have happened to her. That call's odd. That phone call is really odd.
I think they misunderstood an inquiry. Like, there is no way it did not catch the FBI's eye that there's a missing person in Azell, Texas, regardless of the date, in 2012, where they wanted some more information. And so now I will say, so on her DNA, on her NamUs page, they make a reference to, under the circumstances, that a Fort Worth police detective named Kyle Sullivan submitted FRS to UNTCHI, that's going to be NamUs. It says case number submitted with FRS DNA to UNTCHI are 13-26763 and 13-03618. So 2 relatives submitted some type of DNA for comparison and case remains were found. And I have now reached out to Kyle Sullivan to try and get in touch with him, because he was the detective who would have had this. I have the case numbers. I have all of that information. And then I have a Melodia Clark, who's a CID detective. And then her boss, I had their information from the sheriff's office. They all have 2012 and 2013 cases on Tammy Cherie Ellis. So I'm trying to reach out to them to see if I can't clarify some things.
Actually, now I don't know what the parameters are exactly, but you can definitely get a positive identification from a parent, because your parents are the only 2 people in the world that are going to have a 50% match with your DNA, around a 50% match. But when you have siblings, sometimes it can take, more than one. But just to make that identity, I think it would probably.
Well, I reached out to all these people. I did find an email address from a family member who I reached out to them as well. But the deal with her is, if she turns out to be something interesting, we will come back and cover her. And I say that because I can't tell yet if there's something interesting to her. The only reason she came back up, first of all, I have to always follow back up on my Texas cases, because they never give me the information on the first try. And half the time you end up in, if it's an open case, and this is true with like Ellie Pierce, still Eleanor Pierce's case, you end up in a situation where you're communicating with the Attorney General's office there and explaining your appeal, and it becomes a court process really quickly, like one step away from a lawsuit. But you won't win a lawsuit in Texas if they just claim it's an open and active investigation. So Ellie Pierce is February of 2012. This case is February of 2012. But I'm thinking Azell makes a lot more sense than like Rusk, Texas, which is where Jimmy Tidwell was.
It is odd that he's the one that sort of gets the attention. I mean, it was what was available, right?
Yeah, and even then, you and I didn't completely disagree. I know other people have talked about this, but here's how that goes. Other people like to talk about the NamUs cases or whatever, which is all the missing persons photos that are released from the FBI files that are, in Key's browser cache. But you and I figured out by going through old searches of the FBI VICAP page that all they were seeing there was a single page of him having searched on VICAP. And it was all those names in a row, exactly like they had them for comparison, on the VICAP page. Well, other people have gone with Jimmy Tidwell's The Last Victim because of the hard hat and the hair, where he makes the comment to Jeff Bell that, Jeff asks, how did you get the hair in that picture? Is it a wig or did you buy it? And he says, no, it's free if you take it, which is a pretty creepy comment.
It's so creepy.
I do think that because the information in Tammy Ellis's case is so bad, here's what I think happened. I think she was hanging out with some people and maybe not paying, the family wasn't paying as much attention as they usually did. She's a 20-some-year-old girl. And I think there's some discrepancies here in when she was last seen and who saw her where and whatnot that could probably either be cleared up and completely rule her off my list. Like if she was known to have been at home in April, then I don't think that anymore. But if that's not the case and they really don't know when they last saw her and it's kind of just generic dates that are being attached when they slap on May 1st and January 1st and 2013 and whatnot, then I think she is one of the most probable last victims of Israel Keys from the perspective of being real close to where the Annette South fire took place and where the Azelle bank robbery took place. And that would make me want to investigate that further.
I agree that geographically speaking, and just sort of the overall vagueness of her case, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully, I don't know. We may not be able to find anything, but I do find it interesting. So if she truly went missing on April 28th and she was reported missing in May, I mean, that's a pretty quick notice, right?
Yeah.
That's the only hurdle I really would have to get past. Otherwise, she absolutely could be his victim.
Yeah, so that one, I'm going to do some more digging. I did get some more information. Like I said, most of what I'm talking about right now is because either NamUs or NCIC or something else has been updated about them. With Mitzi Jones, I got a little more information about like how her last circumstances went down. And with Tammy Ellis, I actually undid some information because of updates to what I could see on her profiles. Specifically, both of those were NCIC and NamUs. And that was just the different descriptions that became available and where you could see them. There's one last case in Texas I'm going to cover, and that's going to be it for this episode. Then I'm going to go back over to the other coast. This is okay. And I don't know if you remember doing this or not, but we went real hard looking for couples. And we were wondering all along if we were making a mistake and that the couple thing wasn't very likely. You remember that?
The couple thing has been one of the most baffling elements of Keys's confession overall, I think. And I've sort of, over time, come to the conclusion that I don't think it's a traditional couple. I certainly don't think it's a couple that has the same last name. And there's a couple of other things that I've come to the conclusion of, but it's really bothered me.
Well, I've got a couple we're going to talk about on the other coast, but while we're in Texas, one of the things I have discovered is that couples, and I'll even say twosomes, pairs, they very rarely go missing and aren't accounted for. It does happen, and it's happened for years. The most common thing that we find is a plane accident, a boat accident, or a car accident, meaning a vehicular incident has occurred, and that car goes into water or into the woods and isn't found, or that plane goes down and has a couple of people on board, or that boat shows up and has missing people.
You know, it's interesting though, and this isn't to contradict what you just said, but typically when people go missing in vehicles, a lot of times they're by themselves, right?
Absolutely.
In planes, there's typically like a pilot and some passengers. And then on a boat, if the boat sinks, there's usually like multiple people that go down with it. But a lot of times, in other circumstances, it's actually really strange for a completely intact boat to resurface and like more than one, which would be two occupants of the boat both drowned, even though the boat is like completely fine.
Yeah. And so that's where we get to. There's not a lot out there on this case, but I'll just go ahead and say I will call this one of the strangest things that I've ever seen, for a number of reasons. So this takes place in October of 2003, and it's in Texas. It's at Lake Travis in Texas. So that's the first thing that makes it weird. The second thing that makes it weird is the first occupant is a guy named Robert Cannule. And he goes by, it appears that he goes by Jeep or Bob. His obituary reads like this: beloved husband, father, and friend, Robert Bernard Cannule Sr. He is presumed drowned due to a tragic accident on October 3rd, 2003. He was a happy, loving man who made many friends throughout his life. He will be remembered for the great joy he brought into our lives. The family will receive friends at 2 p.m. on Saturday, November 15th, 2003, at the Celebration of Life service to be held at Cook Walden's Chapel of the Hills on Anderson Mill Road. Bob was born on December 1st, 1943 in Detroit, Michigan. He's survived by his wife, Carol, his son, Rob Jr., and his daughter, all of Austin. He's also survived by his sister, Alice, his brother, William, his brother, Dennis, his sister, Doreen, and many nieces, nephews, and godchildren. He was preceded in death by his parents, Eileen and John. Jeep, as many knew him, which is like the SUV Jeep. That's his nickname. He was loved for his sense of humor and his readiness to help anyone in need. He enjoyed an enormous capacity for friendship and will be missed by many whom he considered precious friends. He served in the U.S. Navy in his younger days. He loved outdoor activities, especially playing golf and watching sporting events. He enjoyed traveling with his family and friends, and he was the owner of BC Developers, a general construction and development company, which he moved from South Lyon, Michigan, to Austin, Texas in 1983. He was active in the Northwest chapter of Business Network International, which is a professional business networking group. And he served for many years on the steering committee for Alliance for Infant Survival, the North Texas chapter for SIDS, which is Sudden Infant Death Syndrome. In lieu of flowers, contributions may be made to the Robert B. Cannule Memorial Fund and should be sent to the attention of Sharon Hopkins at Wells Fargo Bank. So there's a couple of entries online where people are talking about Bob, or Jeep, as he is known. What caught my attention about him is he is half of a pear.
And it's a pair that's not a pair unless you see that they're a pair.
Right. So on the same day at Lake Travis that Bob went missing, Muna Muhammad Haji went missing. She's described as an African-American female with brown hair and brown eyes. She goes by the name Mona, and some agencies refer to her by that name. She has breast implants. She's a native of Somalia, and she moved to the United States in 1997. She's deaf or nearly deaf in her left ear. Her exact age and date of birth are unclear, but her official date of birth as given is January 1st, 1978, which would make her 25 when she went missing. So she's 25 years old, But it is clarified by the Texas Department of Public Safety that she could have been as young as 21. And Bob is not. Bob is 59 when he goes missing. If he were alive today, he would be 78 years old. What's interesting about this is Mona and Bob were last seen together on a boat off of the VIP Arena in Lake Travis, Texas. This boat was found in Cottonwood Cove near Laga Vista, which is also where Ellie Pierce was found, close to there. The boat was empty, and Bob's truck was found parked at the marina. They have never been heard from again. It's believed that they may have had an accident and drowned on Lake Travis. I don't know where Israel Keys was on October the 3rd, 2003. I am not saying this has anything to do with him. But what I'm saying is, with the truck being accounted for, the boat being accounted for, you got two people in swimwear in October in Texas who just vanish at Lake Travis. They have never been accounted for in any way, shape, form, or fashion.
When we found these, I looked into Lake Travis, and there's a very, very small number of people who have gone missing in Lake Travis and not returned, not been found.
Yeah.
And I want to say it was like one guy in 1998 and maybe like a couple of people in the 70s at the same time. And then I think there wasn't anybody except these two people in 2003. And then there was one in like 2000, maybe 14 or 2018. So it's very uncommon for people to drown in Lake Travis and for them to not be recovered.
Yeah.
And so in this particular case, it could have been warm enough in October, I guess, for them to be swimming. But it's always an odd thing, unless there was some sort of malfunction on the boat. It's always odd that two people would drown.
Yeah.
I feel like I understand that there could be cases where like one person is drowning, the other person is trying to help them, and they end up both drowning. But usually it's one or the other, unless the boat is sinking or whatever. It's just really strange that like two people could drown without an additional thing happening. Now we skip over this, and I guess I'll just skip over it too. It's considered that they're just called companions, right? These two people are companions.
Right. I have un-Israel Keys thoughts related to what might have potentially happened here. And I could go with he jumps in and has something happen to him and she tries to save him and they both drown. But then I also have something untoward going on here where he's a businessman with a wife and money, and
They live in Somalia now.
And maybe they live in another country, or maybe someone made them disappear.
It's a strange now, and I don't want to jump to conclusions. It is not addressed anywhere that I can see.
None of this is addressed. This case, it pops up, and there's about 4 news articles less than 6 lines long about this case. MSNBC runs it briefly. KXAN runs it all in 2003, mainly in November of 2003, after it happened and like right before his memorial service. This case is never cleared up in a way that I go, oh, now I understand what happened.
And, it is like the logical sequence of events here is that they drowned, right? But I'm just pointing out from the research I did surrounding, and it was actually a different case that led me to this case. So the research that I did, it says like it's really weird for two people to drown at approximately the same time and their boat to be found unscathed.
Right.
In this body of water, if this is the case, it has never happened before.
Yeah. So if this is one of those cases where it gets put on my Israel Keys list because I was hunting for pairs and couples. You were sort of bunny hopping with me across a number of cases, and you actually pointed this out to me. And we didn't include it in the original Israel Keys couples because I was pretty sure at some point I was going to come across a piece of information related to this case, and I was going to go, oh, well, that makes sense now. And that has not happened. It will be 20 years.
20 years.
It'll be 20 years next October that this case has been a mystery.
And to me, again, the bodies are almost always found at this lake. I know that there's some fluctuation in water levels this time, in 2022 with climate change and all the other factors coming into play. I did read some about how there are quite a few. So this lake was made, right? It was they flood.
Yes,
I
it's
believe it was
man-made.
the Army department that handles that kind of thing. They flooded an area, and there are trees and things like that under the water that could be particularly hazardous to people.
Yes.
Again, I'm just kind of going off of the information that was available and saying it is entirely possible these two people just drowned, but the circumstances are very, very strange.
Yeah.
And unlikely. Even though it is likely they drowned, both of them drowning at the same time is unlikely. There's more than likely something else that influenced the situation. I don't know. It doesn't necessarily have to be Israel Keys, right?
It
But
doesn't even have to be any kind of serial killer. It could simply be that this was a chosen disappearance.
sure. Or that they were drinking. I would buy that two people could drown after they were drinking, but there's no information to indicate that, right?
Right.
All we know is that the boat was found. They were last seen together on the boat, and then they were no longer on the boat. They hop over the connection there in his. I mean, they don't mention her in his obituary, right?
No, she's not. You're right.
Which
It's a
makes it weird
news clip. Yeah.
because it seems like if it was like an adopted daughter, she would have been mentioned.
Well, I even wondered if it wasn't like his son's girlfriend.
Well, that would still be inappropriate.
Maybe. I mean, there've been times I've been out with my mother-in-law and my father-in-law, weird places.
Yeah, but I guess I was gonna say, yeah, but you're a 40-something-year-old man, which she was at least 21. Um, I I don't see it. The fact that she's not mentioned in the obituary doesn't help sort it out for me, making it some sort of benign interaction that it shouldn't be questioned. Because if she was like part of the family or something, it would have come up.
Well, I'll tell you what, they sure as hell accepted the idea that these people drowned.
Drowned.
Because they don't make a single stink anywhere, ever. It's not even mentioned. And if you look at their family now, they're all smiley and happy.
This is one of those things, like, I can't believe that they successfully ignored it.
It was definitely ignored. And I looked everybody up on Facebook, all the family members, everything that I could. As far as I can tell, everybody is smiling and happy, and most of them are still alive. And they never talk about this. It is never mentioned as an anniversary or there's an investigation. It's not even mentioned when it happens. It's just like they're gone.
And largely, I'm a big advocate for, like, this is none of our business, right?
Yes.
Like, whatever their relationship was is none of our business. But it's just so weird to me that I want to know, especially this far out, and especially so. if you ever do your own research and you find yourself looking for couples that are missing, okay, there are not a lot to choose from.
No, not that aren't reasonably easy to understand / solved.
I would say even the ones that are easily, like you can easily deduce what's happening, I would say even those are few and far between. I
Correct.
mean, and I mean missing, right? Like not couples that have, murder suicide or something like that, but just missing couples are so few and far between. I mean, they really, really are. And, with Keyes, it's a little nugget of information from his interviews with the FBI that there's a couple or a pair or two people that are two of his victims. Now, they didn't I find it infuriating that we don't know more information about that because it was right there, you know?
Yep.
And there's no way to know more information about that. I've heard that if you just do sort of a passing glance, it's hard to even find any couples at all,
Or
right?
pairs. Like we've had to stretch just to make pairs out of people who go missing in proximity and time.
Right. And so I do think that's one of the biggest things for me because I literally go through and I can discount it. Like in this case, it would be that, oh, they just drowned. Right.
Yeah.
But at some point, we have to be like, well, somebody's got to be the pair. Right.
Yeah.
And to me, that would be like a really big deal for a couple, a pair, two people to go missing at the same time. Now, these people, if you're just looking through missing persons, they're not going to be linked together, except I believe the Charlie Project links them. But like in NamUs, I don't think they're linked. I don't think it's mentioned that they went missing together.
At one point, she wasn't even in NamUs.
It says that Robert and a friend, but they don't name the friend on NamUs.
Well,
so she's not named. I don't know that she's in NamUs. But anyway, so, I've gotten to the point where I'm looking in descriptions trying to make pairs out of people that went missing together. It is a really odd thing for two people to go missing under the same circumstances, like at the same time. I do think something is going to come up in Keyes's, not that we'll ever know, but Keyes's situation, what he talks about as his couple that were his victims, I think there's going to be something that's off-putting, whether it's like one was reported missing a different day or like there's going to be something to it.
Yeah. She is in NamUs. She went into NamUs in February of 2021.
So did he.
Yeah. So, and hers says Mona and a friend were on a boat on Lake Travis. The boat was not anchored and found floating unoccupied on Lake Travis an hour after they had rented the boat. Their bodies were never recovered.
Isn't that strange?
It is strange. And according to NCIC, she had a belly button ring on, and that's all. That's it. That's the whole description for additional descriptions.
I've seen where she had on like a black and brown two-piece bathing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
this is the only additional. It says he was last seen wearing a t-shirt and shorts.
It sounds like two people who are going out boating, but it really isn't anybody's business, but like a little more details could have been helpful. He was teaching her how to drive a boat.
Or to swim, or I don't know.
If he was teaching her how to swim, I do buy more so that they drown. I don't feel like that. Well, I guess it's whatever you have, but I don't think a lake out in the middle of a lake off a boat is the best place to learn how to swim.
No.
I've heard people drown in that lake often. It's just they aren't gone for 20 years.
Yeah, there are a lot of drownings. That's what stood out to me when we came back to this case was if you go through and just look at Lake Travis missing person, almost all of them are solved. They're solved because somebody goes missing and they're found floating or they're found on the shore or a dive team finds them and recovers them. they have a very proactive area dive team that goes in and looks for people. It could be that like the hour floating boat made it difficult to do that, but they definitely did dive searches for these people. I found some records of them, just no records of like the bodies or any remains being recovered. And clearly they're being put into NamUs 18 years after it happened.
I always automatically think that they're doing it because they're reviewing the case against Keys.
Maybe. I know that's not always the case,
I
but it
know.
crosses my mind as well.
I
So-
do. I think to myself, why else would they be putting it in so much later?
Well, so these are the anniversary episodes of Israel Keys, and this was part 1. We do have a part 2. And part 2 is a little more about a pair. And it also is about a pair of cases that aren't related that I've been working on and even talking to cold case detectives in those cases. And actually, we'll be talking about those in the next episode, which is part 2 of Israel Keys having been dead for a decade.
Thank you for joining us. We are sponsored by LabRottiCreations.com. You can check them out at LabRottiCreations.com, and you can still use the code CRIMEXS for a fun pop pet portrait of your own pet. You can also reach us on Twitter, Instagram at TrueCrimeXS, or you can give us a call if you know anything about any of the cases that we're talking about at 252-365-5593. You can also reach us at Gmail at truecrimexs@gmail.com, and you can check out our website at www.truecrimexs.com. We'll see you next time.
This is True Crime XS.
People are strange when you're a stranger. Faces look ugly when you're alone. Women seem wicked when you're unwanted. Streets are uneven when you're down. When you're strange, face come out of the rain. When you're strange, no one remembers your name. When you're strange, when you're strange, when you're strange. People are strange when you're a stranger. Faces look ugly when you're alone. Women seem wicked when you're unwanted. Streets are uneven when you're down. When you're strange, face come out of the rain. When you're strange, no one remembers your name. When you're strange, when you're strange.